Welcome to another Show Me type video with Mr. Oliver. This time I'm using Explain Everything, another app which does a similar job and allows me to continue to these videos for you and to put them on the VLE. Today we're going to see how we find a half, a quarter, 2/4 and 3/4 of sets of objects. Let's look at an example first. What about a half? A half means 1 out of every 2. It can also mean sharing between 2 people. We're not using sharing today, we're going to be using grouping. So let's look at the example of a half. 1 out of every 2, or a half of 10, means that for every pile of 2 that you can see, shade 1 of them. So for every column of 2 circles, I'm going to colour in 1 of those. That's 1 out of every 2, 1 out of every 2, 1 out of every 2, 1 out of every 2. And there's 2, 4, 6, 8 circles there, so I need 2 more. So I've got to make sure I start with 10. If I start with 10, there you can see 1 out of every 2 equals a half, and a half of 10 equals 5. So the principle, the idea of finding 1 out of every is very helpful for finding fractions of numbers, regardless of what the fraction is. Let's try another example. A quarter, that's 1 out of every 4. Okay, and the advantage of fractions is it's like a code. It tells you how many you need to keep and how many you need to put in each pile before you decide how many you're going to keep. So the number on the bottom, the denominator, tells you how big each pile will be. The number on top, the numerator, will tell you how many you get to keep out of every however many. So let's look at a quarter of 12. You can see I've organised them into sets of 4. So I'm going to keep 1 out of that column of 4, 1 out of that column of 4, and 1 out of that column of 4. Visually then you can see quite clearly a quarter of 12 equals 3. I can check this by knowing that a half of 12 equals 6, and a half of 12 equals 3. So half of 12 is 3, which is a half of a half is the same as a quarter. Okay, if you cut a half into half, you'll end up with quarters. Okay, another example. So what about if I ask for 2/4 of 8? Well, some people say, isn't that the same as doing a half? Well, it is. Let's visualise that using ratio. Okay, here we go. So 1 out of every 2 of 8 gives me the answer 4. And 2/4 of 8, that's 2 out of every 4. Notice I've set up my 2/4 in piles of 4, and I'm now shading in 2 out of every 4 in each column. Again, we're using the mathematical arrays, which we used a lot with multiplication and division. And as you can see, a half of 8 is the same value, different appearance, to 2/4 of 8. Okay, what about 3/4? Well, 3/4 in the same method we've used repeatedly now. It works like this. 3 out of every 4 means 3/4. So 3/4 of 12 means 3 out of every 4. So 3 out of that 4, 3 out of that 4, 3 out of that 4, giving me 9. Okay, now I tend to use pictures a lot with Key Stage 1. With older Key Stage 2 children, I'd show them a shorter abridged method of recording. But I think it's really important that children have something very concrete, very pictorial to fall back on that will help them find the answers to these kind of problems. Okay, look again at the methods that we've used, watch the video a couple of times, and see if you can find the answer to these tricky problems. Good luck.